we just need to make sure that we still maintain our integrity and just be open with our opinions. Welcome to those who are joining us online. We haven't yet today, but the live stream will end when we go into closed session. Just a bit of housekeeping. Microphones are sensitive, so just be mindful when you're rustling papers, stationery or wrappers. They can pick up multiple conversations, so we just need to make sure that our speaker has finished before someone starts. And mobile phones, we make sure that they're on silent, and if you have your phone on vibrate, you should just either have it in your bag or on yourself, because vibrations can be heard through that. All right, is there any apologies for today's meeting? I think everybody's here. Do we have any leaves of absence that is required? No leaves of absence. Confirmation of our previous meeting, of the minutes of our previous meeting. Everyone happy with that? No, Christine?
I'm just looking at, sorry David, I'm just looking at the November the 9th. Mayor will be in Toowoomba for local roads and transport. I believe.
That's correct.
So I'll
Leave of absence?
leave absence for the 9th.
The three of you or what?
Yeah. You could well pay to revisit those meeting timeframes too. I'm not too sure what the travel arrangements are. I've got it down starting on Wednesday the 9th. We've also got a general meeting on the 8th, as well as another committee, a finance and infrastructure committee meeting earlier that morning on the 8th.
Wednesday's actually, there's only a meet and greet at 5 to 7 p.m. on Wednesday afternoon, so it's right
We
day.
travel.
Didn't you discuss
So we did.
leaving that afternoon, from memory?
Well, I think if meet and greet is on the 9th, then we probably only need to look at either moving the Leadership and Governance Committee meeting or going ahead with it without the Mayor, Councillor Rolfe and myself in attendance.
What time did you need to leave here? Can we move the meeting forward now?
Oh, it's about 70 hour run.
That's 9 a.m.
Yeah, pushing it.
And to be perfectly honest, I wouldn't be coming up here on Wednesday morning for a meeting to drive back to, because that gives me a 10 or 11 hour.
So you can go ahead on the date prescribed,
Right.
if that's an option, or you can move it. It's a committee's choice.
You have a go to go ahead?
Yeah, well, just providing no one else drops out.
Yeah, well, that's
Just wait for call.
I'll put it go ahead.
Mayor, there is another option. If we had it, if you had it earlier that day, and I phoned in and you guys left afterwards.
So it's Rolfe, Nixon, Bribblecombe, Lacey and McIndoe. So the quorum's 3, the Mayor's ex officio. So we're really only talking about one council.
It's only 1 hour, yeah, should be okay, shouldn't it?
Okay, so I'll ask for leave of absence.
Yep.
And me as well.
Yeah. So the resolution, and we'll get a moving sector. So if you can attract a moving sector to support that.
Moved by Councillor McIndoe. Seconded, Councillor Bribblecombe.
McIndoe and Mulcahy, that leave of absences for the next meeting. And we'll record the date and minutes. We agree that the council stays in role. We'll keep moving and Sarah will catch up.
Yeah.
Learn a driver.
So, confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. Moved, councillor Rolfe, seconded, Milgram. No mistakes in that one.
Sorry?
No mistakes in that one.
We put one in there, we're just not sure if anyone's found it yet.
There's spelling mistakes, but there's typos.
If you do find any of those typos or little issues, feel free to let us know, preferably before the meeting, and we can have those noted as amendments. That saves congesting time during the committee meeting, but we're more than happy for any advice.
So Andrea picking them up afterwards.
Sorry?
So it's Andrea picking them up and putting them in the briefing afterwards.
So, out of those minutes, is there any business arising? That's the next year. So that'll just lead straight into the actions. Review of outstanding meeting actions.
On the action list, just the one number 67, the non-compliance issues department. So it says here action should be directed to governance coordinator. Where was it was directed to Bill.
Yeah, that's what it says in the comments.
Yeah, so, but it was directed to you, Brad.
Was it?
Well, there's a report on the agenda that is in response to this
Yes, there
item
is.
in relation, particularly the waste compliance issues. And that involves, that's why I feel Jess was here and Kemp, and they're part of Brad's team. Yeah, so I mean, it's got Phil and Brad identified as being responsible. So just clarification, what does that mean? Action should be directed to the governance coordinator.
I think through the chair that what we can do is capture that in the new compliance software in LGAQ. We can capture that to ensure that the reporting continues through. So we will work with Brad's department to ensure that that is captured in the new software.
Okay, no,
I think that's what commentary means in that instance.
Okay, well, I think picking up on that through the chair, that entire comment is in relation to what Mary has described, and probably would be good to have a status update that references the action required, which is specifically about the compliance with DEHP legislation, which we're acting on today. But I think for completeness, if there was a notation there, then it would draw a question. So this is it here. So that's more around that software side of things. And again, that's the waste order.
So no more actions needed. Any material personal conflict of interest, personal gift and benefits to be declared? No. No petitions? No.
Chair.
Bill, the water waste and volunteer.
Basically, we're bringing back an update on waste management compliance, where we're at. Since the last presentation to the standing committee, we have had further inspections by the EPA. So we have 18 waste management facilities across the Central Highlands. and they are managed through our operational conditions for landfills, which are defined in our Environmental Authority. In late July, early August, the Department of Environment and Heritage Protection came out and undertook further inspections on our facilities. They inspected Rubyvale, Capella and Thierry, and as a result of that, they identified another 24 non-compliances or areas of concern. Some of these non-compliances were actually incorrect assumptions which we identified back to the department, or they were things we could actually action immediately. So for instance, in Capella, one of the non-compliances was waste spillage from the oil drums, but on the day we were actually at that time cleaning up that area and fixing it while the EPA were there. So that's just one example. There are still a number of issues that were identified that we do have to address, and as part of that, we've developed a register or an action list, which was appendicised to the document, and I've colour-coded for things that are green because we've already done them or they've been actioned, blue if they're going to be actioned in the next pretty well 12 to 18 months, and some longer term actions which will take a bit longer to address. So one of the things that we're looking at is looking at that action list to bring some things forward. We're looking at potentially 1.58 million additional capital funding. We're looking at potentially bringing forward from the waste reserves into this financial year, with a view to start works in April rather than July, so we can fast track some of these non-compliance issues. To date, we've pretty well spent or allocated all our CapEx work, so we're pretty well up to date with all our capital program. With the Springshore transfer station pretty well completed, the new waste cell at Lockleys completed, as well as closure plans close to being finalised and developed for some of our sites. Some of the key issues that the EPA identified was Capella landfill. Basically, it was closed back in 1998. It wasn't closed off properly, so they converted it to a landfill, but it's still an open pit. There are several open pits. So when the EPA went out, so EHP as they are now, basically they deemed it to be still an operating landfill because it hadn't been capped and closed. And that picked up a number of non-compliances. The other issue we also had was Rubyvale Sapphire landfill. We had an incident there back in late July where we had leachate bubbling out the side of the landfill and onto the roadside curb. As that was cleaned up pretty well immediately, we identified it and the area was fixed up. So we actually did receive a warning notice for that last week. But we've been working closely with the department to rectify these issues and keeping them closely in the loop. So we're very happy with our responses and how we're notifying and how we're working closely with them. The other issue that the department picked up was the lack of groundwater monitoring at facilities like Capella, Thierry, Rubyvale and even Lockleys. The big push from the department has been making sure we do that receiving environment monitoring. They need to know, and it's part of our licence position, what impacts we're having on the environment. That's groundwater and surface water. Because we are discharging stormwater from these sites, they need to know basically, are we having an impact on the environment? The other issue was, because of this additional environmental monitoring, there is a need to increase our operational costs, so expenditure for environmental monitoring. So we've currently got a local company undertaking environmental monitoring when we need to, and they're also supported by our waste attendants who have underdone training now, environmental monitoring and sampling. But because of the EPA's requirements, we're looking at boosting the monitoring. So there's additional monitoring now with Capella and Rubyvale. That will be surface water monitoring and groundwater monitoring basically during the wet season. So I'll basically go through each of the sites where we've had issues previously and outline some of the actions we've taken and some of the things we've done. So it'll be a broad summary. So at Loch Lees, as I said before, the new waste landfill has almost been built. We're just waiting on a final leachate sump to be installed, but the lining is in place and the actual bottom of the sump has been built. So it's literally 1 week away of being completed. We have put in improved stormwater management and increased the size of the stormwater detention pond at Loch Lees, but further works are required there. So we need to increase the size of that pond. We've got an engineer basically to size up our stormwater management system. We can, without having to dig up lots of waste, we can essentially achieve what they call a Q5 stormwater event and keep all the water on site. Once we go past Q5, so it's a 1 in 5 rainfall event, the 24-hour rainfall, water will discharge from site. And that's how basically that's what we can achieve. The department generally asks for what they call Q10, but we can only achieve Q5 without digging up waste, which we don't want to do because it increases risks and safety risks and even increases risk of environmental harm. Once you bury things like asbestos and drums, you don't want to dig them back up again. So the other issue we've also done is we're developing a formal stormwater management plan, so we've got engineers doing that. We've also developed a receiving environment monitoring plan for Loch Lees, so that talks about monitoring the groundwater and the surface water up and downstream of Loch Lees landfill. So when we do have an event that is larger than the Q5 and we are releasing water, we can monitor the impacts. We monitor upstream and downstream, so we compare any of the downstream to the upstream. If it's the same, no worries, everybody's happy. So basically it's demonstrating we're not causing an impact. Blackwater landfill, pretty well exactly the same has happened there. We've got the engineers doing up stormwater management plans. We are currently doing works to also increase the stormwater capacity there. Again, we were able to achieve what we call a Q5 stormwater event and keep the water on site with the improvements. Again, following Q5, we'll need to release and we'll need to monitor. Springshaw landfill now being converted to a waste transfer station, which reduces our risks and liabilities with the department. Now it's a transfer station, it's essentially a cash. We will then move towards closing that formally and taking it off our licence.
Just on Springshaw, you say that it should address most of the EHB legislation.
Yeah.
What's the other bits?
Well, you will still have your environmental duty, so it will address stormwater, it will address litter control, it will address ongoing management. We'll still have issues with illegal dumping, we'll still have some issues like that. So for instance, the dump ties that are going at Springshaw. So we're still always going to have those sort of ongoing issues. For Ralston, it's a small unlined landfill. So the previous inspection picked up a few issues. The last inspection we actually got no non-compliances. The problem at Ralston is that the landfill is actually close to some of our groundwater bores in the area. So the view is that we really do need to close that facility in the long term.
The community seemed to want further to be a bit.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
And that had been picked up previously as a non-compliance by the Department of Environmental Protection Agency. So we would look to see Ralston eventually moving towards being a transfer station as well. We've already done initial concept designs for Ralston, but not detailed design. Rivervale and Sapphire, as I mentioned before, we had a incident with leachate leaving the site. They then did a formal inspection on the 3rd and 4th of August, they being the Department of Environment and Heritage Protection, and identified other non-compliances such as windblown litter, and a lack of environmental monitoring as well. So, and again, we have, we've just received draft environmental monitoring programs from our consultant, and we're looking at putting groundwater bores in it. We've also done concept design and detailed design for Rubel's Sapphire. So we're now in the position that we're shovel ready. And this is one of the programs, it is actually planned for next financial year, but I'd like to bring forward to April following the wet season. We can then basically tender over the next 6 months and kick that project off early, 3 months early in April, after the wet season, and build ourselves a waste transfer station facility, which will be very similar to what we've got at Springsure. So they'll manage the stormwater. I think the bins will be smaller, but we won't have 30 cubes, we'll have 4 15s, so you don't have the drop off that we have at both Springsure. But moving forward, that is the plan, to bring that forward for 3 months. So we'll look at reviewing that at BR2 in December and talk to finance and council. That's accepted. Capella landfill. Basically, as I said before, it is already a transfer station. The problem is we've never actually gone back and tidied up the site and capped it off. By doing that, obviously it stops the risk and liability. We can then move towards formally closing off the aspects and removing it from our environmental authority. Again, this is something I'd like to bring forward. We've budgeted for that next financial year. Again, if we can start that in April, it just gives us a head start during the dry season to get in and start cleaning up that site. Now, there's a lot of cost in that site because it essentially does need capping to a full cap of half a metre across the top, and it needs all the old pits filled in and the exposed waste buried and things like that. That's also another site we need to do an environmental monitoring, have environmental monitoring and put groundwater bores in. Moving on to Thierry landfill. Again, the EPA basically identified non-compliance associated with environmental monitoring. We were concerned about the freeboard in one of the ponds, but we actually identified them that if it actually did overtop, it would actually overtop back into the landfill, into the pit. So Thierry being an old quarry site. But we do need to undertake environmental monitoring, and we do need to undertake some level of groundwater monitoring at Thierry. We're arguing against groundwater monitoring at Thierry because it sits in a basalt quarry, and just trying to put groundwater bores through basalt is not the easy thing to do. So we're going back on the practical side and saying, look, we'll try, but if we drill and we don't find any groundwater or we get refusal, there's no point doing groundwater monitoring. So you've got an impervious layer there already with the basalt. So that's one of our items to bring forward into the receiving environment monitoring program. So we'll still do surface water monitoring. We'll attempt to put in groundwater bores, but if we can't, we'll remove that from the program. Finally, Bowden Tunning landfill was the other site they inspected. So at that stage, it was still an open pit. Since then, we've actually capped the pit off. We've installed the bin station, and we've actually raised the bin. The bin station has a roof over it. We've lifted that up a bit. The original design wasn't particularly great. Couldn't quite open the lids fully. So we've now lifted it so we can leave the lids fully open, so which means people can get in and put their stuff in a lot easier. So with that capping, that'll remove a lot of our risk. Again, part of our environmental licence says once we finish a landfill, we have to have a closure plan. We've commissioned someone to do closure plans for both Bowden Tunning and Willows, because we did both sites at the same time. So once those closure plans are done, we've done the works associated with closure plans, we then submit it all to the Department of Environment and Heritage Protection, and we move that off our licence. So again, it removes the risks and liabilities. The only thing you must be aware of is all our landfills, irrespective of once of the landfill, we do have to monitor and keep an eye on for 30 years post-closure. So, and that is a current licence condition. And that's generally written into the closure plans that we write. So, and the closure plans talk about the final layout capping, how we rehabilitate the site, what we do with it, and the ongoing monitoring that we need to do. I've talked about the environmental monitoring, and 30 years. And finally, we will look at amending our licences to allow the discharges past a Q5 rainfall event. We were looking at going down that road following at least a year's worth of monitoring data, because you need data to support your amendments. So you have to use the science to support your case. What's happened since then, because we've had quite a few non-compliances, we actually met with the acting compliance manager, Tony Baker, and the local principal officer here, Nigel Ryan, on the 8th of September. We basically went through all the actions we're doing for every site, what we've done to date. So we literally went through the list. They're extremely happy with what we're doing. Rather than, we did talk about the use of a temporary emissions, a temporary environmental management program, which is a joint program to bring you up to compliance. The department's current view is not to use those. They're not supportive generally of those tools. But in this case, what they're thinking of doing is, rather than using that tool, use another statutory tool, which is a notice of environmental evaluation. So basically, they want us to develop a notice, demonstrate that what we can achieve for stormwater management, which we've already done, provide them with stormwater management plans, and then undertake monitoring, probably a little bit more intensive than our current environmental management monitoring program, over the next 2 to 3 years.
So just, Phil, just on your TEPs,
Yeah.
are they still, a TEP still in legislation? Is
Yes.
that- They are.
Yeah.
So they've just put another layer
Yes.
through, yes.
So
So you're still, you're going to go through this environment, what do you say?
So we won't be going through the TEP, which is a statutory tool.
Yes.
Basically, they'll only use the TEP where there is a clearly identified incident of non-compliance. Whereas because of the waste landfills, it's also potential to cause environmental harm. There's no direct evidence of any environmental harm. So the department's basically said, well, we can't prove you, but you might be causing environmental harm. So we can't give you a test, we will give you an
So they put another layer.
Yeah, they're using a different tool, which basically really does replicate what we're doing.
Yeah.
Probably more monitoring than we probably would do, because we'll probably monitor the creek when we don't have a discharge. But we've gone Q5, which then does give us some background water quality data. So we do that for maybe 2 years, and then we present that data to the department. And then we use that data to go through an amendment process for our license, which then allows us to meet Q5 and still discharge and not be in non-compliance. And while that program is in play for 2 years, you shouldn't have any action for non-compliance, because you're working progressively with the department to undertake an evaluation. But generally, look, they are happy with what we're doing. We also recently had a compliance inspection at the waste transfer station, and we picked up those non-compliances in that case. So there were some previous ones, but we have rectified them.
With the chair, David, with the transfer, with them going from open landfills to transfer stations, and through the rural ratepayers commenting about having to paying this levy, and there was discussion at a local meeting on the weekend in Orion about, well, when or if the process of actually putting in the smaller transfer bins in localities, and can we look to something like that? Because I've been in from Fernlees on the Lexton Road, there's one of these transfer bins,
And it's off the highway, so people tourists and what have you, down the highway don't really know it's there. But it is a place for the locality to actually place their rubbish. So that was a solution that the locals are sort of saying, let's look at something like that. So.
Through the chair, can I add to that? Philip, I think it'd be very helpful at the budget review opportunity that I suppose that we elevate the proposal for perhaps part of this bringing forward of this strategy. When council has identified that through the budget process that this is important, and I've spoken to Brad about this, it would seem appropriate at that point that, and I understand there's a lot of good work in this, and I appreciate very much the follow through here from you and your department and Brad. But there's got to be, I think, a real focus on understanding that we do this probably in the past a little bit, and it's in your report a little bit piecemeal. And I think we really need to actually solve some of these problems, because I understand there's fundamentally two issues. There's the compliance issues that we have, and I think that is a result of probably that piecemeal approach we've taken to in the past. That's not a criticism, but it's more about where some expenditure's gone. I think it's probably a case now this has been elevated to an important priority, and I think even if it's probably a more secure and integrated collection in certain parts of our region, so that they all feed well. And I suppose, from an economics perspective, viable. Understand that we've got a contracting arrangements, but what Councillor Roll's saying is that those localities now that seem to be quite amenable to the fact that they understand there is a waste stream and they do want to participate in that and recycle, that we actually put those facilities in those places. So I think if it can be done, that budget review should look at possibly rolling out the locality bids that we need in those situations, and what Councillor Roll was saying as well. We've done that strategically in terms of avoiding perhaps an oversupply from the travelling public, but certainly in locations so that the locals know where they are. But at the same time, can I say, I mean, we are always welcoming people to use facilities as they come through our region, and I suppose our strategy around that should be to make sure that they feel like they can use them, and we're happy to pay for them as well. So I think that review opportunity should be used pretty well if we can.
And look, through the chair, with the design we've done for Riverview and Sapphire, it was always very made clear to the designers that we need to incorporate the peaks for the tourists coming through. And that being a very good example, was your population can almost double at times during Gen Fest. So.
How much roughly does it, I say roughly, does Sapphire cost to set up?
To set up a new transfer station, when I wrote this, it was an estimate of 700,000. I literally just got at the beginning of this week a bill of cost estimate, which is done as part of the detailed design. So they're talking about 600,000. So Springshaw's 700, so I based the 700 on Springshaw. It's a bit less, I'm rounding up a bit, but Rivervale Sapphire will be a little bit cheaper, so we're thinking with contingencies about 600.
So if you're setting up a small rural bin, as in just one side,
that's a lot cheaper. Essentially, it's simply like what you've got at Anarchy. It's just a shed, which I think costs about $15,000, and then the cost of the fencing if you don't have it in place. And then we basically hire the bins through JJ Richards.
and do you need to set up all weather access as well?
Preferably, yes. Yeah.
So,
And the cost of any roadworks, yeah.
jumps to
But most areas, rural areas, there are, gravel off-road, just off-road.
Just to report.
Bitumen, just off-road.
Yes, like Willows would be an example that it is gravel going in.
And can I just add through the chair, Bill, I think that after the discussion we had last week, I'd really like to, where we can, incorporate some technology into those sites and make sure that we do that, because I mean, monitoring is obviously a critical part of it. So I mean, if we can look at that as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And, Chair, can I just go on to the, just go back to the groundwater monitoring? So, if we're obliged to do all this groundwater monitoring, could we include rural producers, because they actually, through likes of Cherub or, you know, the NRMs, they actually do groundwater monitoring, etc. So can there be some sort of inclusiveness there, or is it?
We can, and it's something I can talk to Cherub about. I'm not aware of what monitoring Cherub's doing. Basically, we have to basically do an upgrading and downgrading groundwater monitoring bore. So one of the things we looked at to try and save costs is whether we could use particularly if there was a bore within 50 metres of the landfill existing that was owned by a rural landholder, that we could use one. So, for instance, there is a groundwater bore near Loch Lees, near the homestead there, which was identified by our consultant. So we've actually asked the consultant to talk to them to see if we could use their bore to undertake groundwater monitoring, which for us is a cost saving because we don't have to install a bore.
Well, that's, I don't necessarily mean it needs to be a cost to council, but we need to, and this is all about the monitoring and about the whole of.
I'll talk to Cherub and find out what monitoring they're doing. It's also the parameters they monitor. We have to monitor particular parameters. So some things that are looked at, we've got quite a suite of parameters we have to monitor. That would be useful data for us, but they're probably not monitoring all the parameters we have.
There's quite a few mines around that do monitoring as well.
Yeah.
So, we can use the information rather than just.
Well, the groundwater bores we'll be monitoring in Blackwater are actually owned by the mine. We did put them in, we asked permission to use their bores, so they're perfectly positioned for us.
Chair, could I just mention too that I suppose these waste compliance issues, information reports are very critical to give you an understanding about where we're driving this reform. And I suppose the catalyst was, and the Mayor did hit the nail on the head where he said there was a fair bit of piecemeal approach as the way that we dealt with this. Recently we had a meeting with DHP where senior representatives of those came to CHRC and basically put us in the picture where we were positioned in local government with respect to our compliance. And I suppose it was from there that we really concentrated our efforts to get a greater understanding about where some of our non-compliance issues were and our faults were. But also try and work a lot more closely with the department as well. What we had found is that there wasn't much attention shown to local governments in the past when the mining sector was very strong. There was a significant amount of their compliance and regulatory work was concentrated on the mining sector. What we've found is it's sort of gone off the board a little bit, and there's a little bit more attention being shown to local governments as well, which is to be expected because we do operate these major facilities. So what we've done is we've tried to build that relationship, but not only that, provide the council with, and like Phyllis said, we've actually got a table there that actually indicates where we are with certain things, what we intend to do. It's regularly updated, and one of the key categories was to try and bring some capital works forward into the budget review as well, because again, we're not only demonstrating to the council that we're on top of these problems, but we're also demonstrating to the department as well that it's something that we're very serious about addressing. And the Mayor also mentioned about the new levy that's in for waste as well, and I know Councillor Rolfe mentioned about trying to look at some of our locality bins and all that, that's all part of it as well. But I just wanted to let everyone know because it's a little bit been ad hoc where I think we've had to grab it by the scruff of the neck in view of probably a wake-up call meeting we did have with DHP. And now we've got some good data and information as how we're driving the reform forward.
No further questions for Phil or Brad around that?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you need a resolution on that, Mr.
The question was, do we need a resolution? And the response from the chair is no. It's more about receiving the information, and the minutes will reflect that this matter was considered by council, and that's sufficient.
Nothing about the parts of the budget.
No.
All right, move on to, slide. We'll-
And it's very hard to keep on top of that. There has to be a system or a tool like this to do that body of work. Otherwise, some things will be forgotten about and they could be a risk area for us. It might be a minor risk, but it's about knowing and being able to triage the type of action that we have to take to fulfil our obligations as a mainstream council to be compliant in all areas. And this is very pleased with this report. It's a very big positive step forward. It was not that long ago that this committee asked for a state of play report. We've been able to deliver on that, but more importantly, we've now got the basis of a strategic tool that will go forward. And how we monitor it, I'm not too sure yet. The ELT need to certainly have a look at it. It could be that this is produced quarterly, monthly, I don't know. And if there be some processes around the risk areas and how they're followed up and reported to respective committees. We're yet to work that side of it out, but this is quite exciting. We've got to a point now where we've got a tool that we can use, and it's just about designing those forward processes. So it's not a whiz-bang fad. It'll be an important thing that will have longevity in the organisation as long as we take our strategic monitoring role seriously. So thanks very much to all involved in getting to the point where it's at. I appreciate it.
Yeah, through the chair, I just want to further that, Scotty. I think it's a tremendous tool. We did ask for something to be produced. Everyone has come through and done it. I just want to extend a thank you to Mary and particularly Lila. This stuff to do, I know to me it's like digging your eye out before. It's a very difficult subject to attend to on a daily matter. And look, I really appreciate the work you guys are doing. And I know that the benefits will come from this, and it's certainly a great benchmark for us to leverage off at these meetings, and I think it's a very big step forward. So I appreciate your work on it, and let's keep working at it, get everyone on the ELT involved in it, and let's see some more green paint put on these. Great.
Of the 128 that are currently not applicable, does the system, like if something becomes applicable because we've had a change of business or a project, does the system, when you put those, highlight that? Or is that something that we need to identify? Because that's, I guess, one area that I see as a risk. There's 128 that are not applicable at the moment. Is there something that could fly under the radar and then all of a sudden is a problem? How does our system identify when they become applicable?
So the system itself will actually be able to advise us of that, because one of the obligations that we will enter in the system is the review of the non-applicables on a regular basis. So it will have the ability to report similarly to this. So we will pull a report that indicates those that are not applicable, and we can continue to reassess against those all the time. So it's not a matter of we knock them out at the start and we never look at them again. The other part of that too is, whilst it's not applicable in its current format, a change to the legislation to the wording that's used, the clauses that are included, may make it applicable, and we actually get notification through the service itself on a regular basis when those legislations are updated, similar to the delegations, and that will also be a further review point for us to go back to the non-applicables and review them again.
Thank you, Lila. Just through the chair also, when Lila was discussing earlier about LGAQ coming up and briefing us on this legislative compliance software, they will be up and they'll be discussing this with the General Council meeting, Leadership and Governance Select Committee.
General, on 22nd of November. Yeah, General.
The General. Right. The purpose of that is not only to work us through the body of work that needs to come and the capability of this system, but it's also to work us through the performance benchmarking software, which is the Better Councils, Better Community software. We're one of the lead councils that are working in that space with LGAQ. We've provided them with a lot of our internal data that demonstrating to the CEO before we roll that out more publicly, but it is available for us separately, and we're leading all the other councils in that space at the moment, and they'll be demonstrating that as well in the performance benchmarking space. So there are HR metrics, our reporting in the waste space, all of our reporting is from 2008 through to today, so we'll be getting some more benchmarking data as well, so it's not just in this legislative compliance space.
Good. Any other questions for Lila or Marianne? Do you want to continue on?
All right, did we want to continue and start with the operational plan? Do you want to track forward
I'm happy to continue. Everyone has to continue until.
All right, so our next report is the operational plan review. So at our Leadership and Governance Standing Committee meeting on the 10th of August, we made a commitment to review the operational plan activities. So the review today will begin with working through the 14 activities that were not completed from the 15-16 operational plan review, and the 3 activities presented as no longer relevant. So Mary has put up on the screen there, and we'll highlight each of these activities on the projection screens, and each ELT member will speak to their relevant activities and what their recommendations are. Once that's completed, we will then begin to work through the 2016-17 operational plan in the same manner, through each of the activities, starting with commercial services, communities, corporate services, then infrastructure, governance and offices of the CEO. At the end of that process, any of the amendments that are agreed here today will be recommended for adoption at the next General Council meeting on the 25th of October. So the review by the ELT, people were requested to review that based on budgetary requirements to ensure budget was in place, and also the quantum of delivery, whether the dates that were in there were achievable, whether they needed to be reassessed, and whether the overall quantum of the activities were achievable in the next financial year. So, Mary, if you'd like to kick off with the first of those.
Through the chair, can everyone, as we go, this is going to be slow and hard going, can we reference any topics we're talking about with numbers and reference points, because I don't want to get lost in the presumption that everyone knows exactly where you are, so if we can, that's probably the last of the little challenge. If we can just reference them as we go, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Of the 14 carryover items or items that were not completed in the 2015-16 plan, they were detailed in the attachment 1. Out of those 14, there was one request to have that one included in the 16-17 plan. If council would like, we can go through line by line and have each general manager explain their rationale for leaving these activities outside of the operational plan process. The ELT members feel very confident in the fact that they can all be managed bar one outside of the operational plan. So would we like to go through them line by line for these items, or just focus on the one that we are exploring and including in the already adopted 2016-17 plan?
To go through them line by line.
I'll begin, Chair. Just with the first items there, referencing 1.3.3. This says the activities represented as not having been achieved includes, well, that's not right. We have achieved holding general council meetings outside of Emerald. So I'm just suggesting that that be deleted, because that's a policy position of council now. So as such, not as it hasn't been achieved, it's just, it's no longer relevant. And with respect to 2.2.1 and 2.2.3.
Just with respect to the first one, if we can, through the chair, and my memory may need to be re-jogged here. I know that we the former council identified the dates and it was conducted under a trial basis. I think there was a report saying that the trial was successful. I don't know if it's a policy or whether or not it's just been the contemporary actions of this council to see fit to re-identify dates for the continuance of it. The question is, you know, if it's a policy or there's a stated position in the minutes that says that this is the way we do business, then that's the case. Otherwise, or it could be in the standing orders too. I'm just not too sure where we've captured this.
Scott, we've actually set the dates for.
I know we have, and what I'm trying to establish, councillor, is have we got it enshrined in the standing orders or in a resolution so that we can say it's policy, or are we just doing it as the way we do business? It's a technical matter. It just may mean, regardless of what we do with this line item, it's probably, the answer is it's already in the standing orders or it's a resolution, it's policy. If it's not, do we want to make it policy?
I think we just had a resolution, didn't we, to continue it?
I can't recall exactly what we've done. By setting the dates, we continue with what was originally a trial, but I don't know how we finalised it. It's a question.
Resolution.
It's
done,
Certainly agree to continue them.
So would it be better looking at putting it into the standing orders where we have outside meetings, or?
It could be there, councillor, I'm not too sure.
So do you want to check that?
It's something
Otherwise,
like
that can come out off this report anyway.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't need to be in this operational plan.
So you're right, Brett?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Chair. I suppose I've only just got a couple of items, so I thought I might group them together. 2.2.1, implement civic pride and identify strategies across the region for high traffic areas. And 2.2.3, enhance and improve town entrances and streetscapes to promote civic pride and aesthetic appeal in all regional towns. Chair, what we're trying to do there is obviously integrate a lot of that work in our livability strategy that we're working through now. So again, we didn't achieve those targets last year. I presented a report to the council about, because there was a number of areas in the communities area that we didn't achieve. But what I've tried to do is encapsulate those particular actions in our livability strategy as we move forward.
So you're suggesting that they be dropped off?
Yes.
Can after each of these points through the chair, can we actually resolve that we'd actually want to leave it or take them out so that we know exactly what we're doing? So the first one we're going to remove, is that correct?
Yeah.
Removing the first one and removing these next two? Is that by consensus or is it? Yeah, by consensus, so the two that Brad's speaking to, yeah.
So is everyone happy for that?
Yep.
You're right with that?
Yeah, we'll catch up. Yeah, let's see what this thing
So where does that sit then, Joe?
It sits on Mr.
If we
Chair.
take that out of.
Yeah, Chair, what I've done, it's actually in, where I've incorporated all of that is in the 16-17 operational plan, which is 1.1.2. And again, I don't want to be jumping all over the place, but that's where I've incorporated those two components into that area.
Top line on the second.
Yes.
Page, 24. Yeah.
Safety, accessibility, support, affordability.
Okay, one
So to record that, do we say we then will report into the other plan?
looking at the spreadsheet, each ELT member has already identified where it's being captured, so that's already covered. So if we're agreeing that we are happy for it to be captured separately if necessary or amended, which will be one of Gerard's.
I think that's the way to go, isn't it? It is already captured there, so we just need to note that that's been captured in 16, 17.
So 2.2.3 the same, it's been captured as well, you say?
Brad is indicating that the improved streetscapes is captured by the livability
Yes, and
strategy,
the one,
which is
one
part.
factor.
Both of them.
Yes.
Correct.
So everyone happy with those two?
Yep.
I'll hand over to Mr. Chairman.
Through the chair, councillors, top down, the Capella preferred option for water supply to Capella prepared and presented to council strategy session.
2.1.1.
2.1.1.
Probably should include Capella's.
What we're suggesting is, it's like any of our other planning studies, is that we just simply manage it outside as a capital works project is currently underway. The study that just manage it outside the operational plan in 16, 17.
So it's being transferred to 16, 17 as well.
No, it's not transferred, but it's a capital project, as in we doing
So it's been undertaken within this year.
Planning.
So
Correct.
should it be in the operational plan this year then?
That's what we're saying.
Yes.
Managed outside the operational plan. Yeah, because it's capital.
So it's not in the 2017 plan, it's
No.
an operational, right?
Yeah.
It's a capital work.
So we recommend that not be carried over, in other words.
So remove that line. Councillors happy with that?
So it's been moved to capital works.
It is capital works.
I mean, it is capital works, but it's, you want to move it off here,
Correct.
off this page. Thank you.
So just so I'm not getting completely pushed here. Now we're recording the fact that you need to have the wording around where it's moved to, I mean, you can't just sort of cross out, so it's extinguished. It's got to have a reference point from an unfinished or unallocated. That's right. And it's got to have a track to where it goes to. So that in fact is not taken off, it's just that it's now a capital works project. Is that what you need, or is that?
Yeah, so this page here that we have, this document, is it doesn't exist outside the purpose of this meeting per se. Where we've indicated in there, like with Brad's line 1, that it's captured in the 16-17 plan, so we're saying yes, we agree that that is sufficient and crosses it off the page. And then with Gerard's line 2, manage outside the 16-17 plan, so we're agreeing that yes, it does not need to be captured in the current operational plan, so it's being managed through capital.
I just don't want the generic word removed. I mean, there's got to be a track here, I imagine.
Yeah, to highlight the mayor's concern there through the chair, if you look at that livability strategy one we just talked about, for example, and Brad quite rightly points out that line item 24, or item 1.1.2, it says things like, and if I use this as an example, I think it'll serve for the continuance of the work we've got to do. So it's saying, develop Central Highlands livability strategy for enhancing livability in the Central Highlands, considering mobility, safety, accessibility, social support, affordability factors. That's what we've got that's what we're going to be going back to looking at, so that we don't lose the intent of these important words of the old line 5, 2.2.1, which does say something that's connected to livability. It says, and this is something that's important to council and we've talked about very recently, implement civic pride and identify strategies across the region for high traffic areas. That can mean a fair bit. And then 6 gets down into your streets, into your entry statements. But we don't want to lose that line 5 and 6 by assuming that livability strategy will tackle all those things. This is extra words that do belong on line item 24, but we don't want to lose the linkage. So we're going to drop off the 5 and 6. They'll disappear, but somehow we don't want to lose those references to the words. So whether we embellish what's in line 24 or something, or add some notes to it, but we don't want to just assume that civic pride strategies will be addressed in livability. That's the danger. So therefore, the cross-referencing is critical that we do that thoroughly.
So then you go to the 2.1.1 that Gerard is talking about.
Yes.
Where is that in, it's not?
But what Gerard, and I'll go through the chair too, what we tend to do, and this is something that should be reviewed at some stage, but what we have done is we've stripped out the references in the operational plan to CapEx projects because we have been reporting on CapEx delivery in conjunction with quarterly reporting of the operational plan cycle. That was something we created a while ago. I don't think it's the best thing to do now, but we can review that in the future. But the rationale behind saying take it out is because we're reporting on it through the CapEx reporting. So it's not, you can argue the pros and cons of that, but the justification for Gerard is that that's the way we've been doing things. What we had, and I will give you a quick history lesson if I can through the chair, the old operational plan was big and it had lots and lots of operational activities. So it had the types of things you'd expect in an operational plan, plus all the CapEx projects, and what we were finding is that it was so bulky, it was taking too long to review, and we were doubling up because we would be talking about the financial performance of the CapEx projects at a separate time. So the double up meant there were issues. The positive change we made was let's take all CapEx out of the op plan, report on it at the same time, but separately. The risk of that is if you showed someone your operational plan and said that's our blueprint for what we're going to do in 1 year in order to stay on track for our 5-year goals and the corporate plan in order to stay on track for the 10-year goals and the community plan, they'd say, oh, it's great, but there's no CapEx delivery in there or there's no big infrastructure projects in there. That's the risk of doing it the way we're doing it. Don't get hung up on that now. That should be revisited to work out the best and cleanest way to report. But for now, I think the focus should be, Mr. Chairman, on what Councillor Hayes is recommending is let's cross-reference this properly. So if we ever have to go back and trace what we've done, we can find those words of the line that we said remove, and we can make sure we're capturing it in one of those new line items that we're reporting on, so we don't lose it totally. We're not going to bring it back and continue to report on, but through good cross-referencing in the minutes, we've got an audit trail.
So Mr. Chair, having said that, shouldn't we have, so we're going to take it on, just note it, that it's been cross-referenced to the CapEx works. Because we don't have a list of the CapEx.
What Sarah can do, going through the chair with the minute taking is, this table can be reproduced in the minutes. And on the right-hand side where there's some blank columns, we'll note what we're doing with the changes. So, as Brad pointed out, I'm picking on Brad's example there, but where he's saying that line item 5, recommendation is, well, it's probably not the cleanest one, but it's delete incorporated into asset management plans. Well, that's probably not the best description there either, but the point is there should be an adequate cross-reference to say what we intend to do here at this meeting, and it will probably be another line in the notes that says this has now been absorbed into item number 1.1.2 as a component of the broader livability strategy.
And are we going to add a couple of extra words in that to get that civic pride?
I think for now, the cross-referencing is the critical point because that's the audit trail, and then there should be some work done on whoever's in charge of delivering the livability strategy. They would want to go back and pick out those key words for the obsolete deliverables, make sure they're capturing in the new one.
Yeah, because they are important.
Yeah, no, very, very much so. Through the chair with the CEO, so they'll be incorporated as part of it.
Through the chair, when we get to the second attachment, which is the in-depth review of the 2016-17 operation plan, we could potentially have the opportunity there to reword the line item, 1.1.2, the livability strategy.
That's right.
So we capture it there. So for now, we'll focus, like suggested, focus on the agreement and the wording, and then fix up the 2016-17 not planning round 2. Acceptable?
Glad to be before me. And John?
Sure, the other sheets.
Right, down to 2.5.2, which is essentially our compliance projects in water or in wastewater. Black Gully, again, it's a CapEx project. So we will report on Black Gully in that space. Did I skip one? Yes, sorry. The one above that next, back one, 2.4.5, our infrastructure agreements. We recommended reporting that outside our operational plan as well. It's similar to our activities such as seeking main roads funding for projects on their network, etc. So we were of the opinion that that is also not a.
So where would that show up then? I would rather see it on the operational plan because we are going to get resource companies coming and going over the next few years, as has been. And if it's not captured somewhere, where's it going to go?
Through the chair, councillor, this is a tricky one because we just, case an example, done a infrastructure agreement with Jellenbach. I don't think we can, in any financial year, predicate what new agreements we're planning to put in place. It's in that context. So having an open-ended one, we have to be able to measure it. So I can't at the beginning of the year say, listen, I'm going to strike. I'm guessing or presuming that there will be a resource company approaching us this year and we will have an infrastructure agreement. So it's one of those activities which doing a general report on it doesn't make sense because we have to be able to measure it.
Yeah, I think if I can, through the chair, we have to support Councillor Nixon there, and the background to that, of which Gerard, you can be forgiven for not knowing, is that this was a very contentious issue with the former council, and I won't name companies or entities, but there were lost opportunities, and this was about council giving a directive to the administration to be a bit more aggressive with trying to secure opportunities for investment in road infrastructure that was connected with development. It wasn't just resource companies, and it probably is a little bit vague, but I think it's the type of activity that you would maybe want in an operational plan. The KPI to measure it would need a little bit more thought. I can see why you recommended to strike it out because of the performance measure, but we should focus on the key activity and maybe redefine the performance measure. So I'd certainly be encouraging the committee to keep it in an amended form.
I'll work with Mary on changing the KPI because as I said it's a difficult KPI to strike, but we'll come up with wording on it. Fine. 4.4.1. Sorry. Oh, sorry, did I Black Gully, my apologies. Drop one line down. I thought that was resolved.
Yeah, it did jump back a line. So that's gone through to one.
Yeah, because Black Gully is a CapEx project, so therefore we don't have to, the outcome is compliance, so we don't have to report an operational plan on it.
But if I can, and I don't want to keep interjecting, I really don't, and, but in the interest of providing another example through the chair about how words mean more than we think, that original activity is about an issue of importance to council. And if you look at it explicitly, it's saying that across all of our critical assets and community infrastructure, are we meeting the environmental outcomes or something to that effect? It so happens that a contemporary issue that we've faced has been Black Gully, and that it's close to being twice hydraulically overloaded, and therefore we need to invest in a new asset, but that activity is a more important message than a particular plant in a particular community. And if it's captured, I take the point that Black Gully, in reference to where that is at, can be captured through CapEx, but the overall compliance, you either keep something like that or you go back to another reference, but not just for the Black Gully reasons.
Would that be part of, in 16, 17, there's something on our
Line 123.
Yeah.
because I remember seeing it all stuff
Apologies, yes, it has been captured in.
It's not really saying the sun is covering the
Grade 1 line, which is not first grade.
Three from the back.
101.
Three from the back.
101.
Line 123.
Full infrastructure utility.
Okay, and again, that's picking on core initiatives as opposed to the broader directive.
Through the chair to the CEO, we also have environmental compliance in other areas, so we probably have to how we structure this.
All right, if we can then keep a note on that one, or question mark around line 8, until such time as we can satisfy ourselves that we've covered it. It could then be a decision to still strike out line 8 or to rewrite the activity with 2.5.2 so it captures everything. Focusing on 4 or 6 or 8 particular projects.
Next, the big yellow highlight 4.4.1. We amended 16-17 plan to include this activity. The question I have, sorry, we didn't have to register which we would like to amend, apologies, we would like to, we missed it during the draft of 16-17, we want to move this one over into 16-17.
That's what it says.
Yep. And then my last one, I believe, is the following line, 4.4.2. Investigate self-funding option for insurance cover for flooding events.
That's been as recommended.
Again,
Drop out.
we suggesting, because this is, we're not sure what the outcome is going to be or how it's going to come about. We dealt with this not in great depth, so the question is, we're not sure what we're going to measure in terms of outcome self-insurance. Is that something that can be managed outside the operational plan? Was there a clear direction from council that they want a defined outcome in this space?
So in today's agenda, it says no longer relevant. You dropped out.
I think the question, if I may, through the chair, I think when working with Gerard on this topic, it's a pre-existing one prior to Gerard joining CHRC, and I think the reason it struggled in the last operational plan was lack of understanding of what the activity was to encompass. What areas of self-funding did council wish to explore? How broad is that subject of self-funding? And to try and narrow that down and look at what options self-funding could be prepared, bearing in mind that council have just joined the LGM asset insurance scheme. So look in an increasing our full cover option for this year as well. So the question was raised, is it currently still a valid question that council wish to explore?
I think you leave it in there.
Well, it's, through the chair, it's something that will have to go to council.
Well, it's in there, isn't it?
I mean, it's in there, so, yeah. So
So-
if it was to be,
So you're suggesting we just transfer it over to 16, 17? Whereas in the agenda, it says no longer relevant.
But you're saying you need probably some more wording around the actual activity. Proposal.
Yeah, Gerard's question was, can we clarify as a whole council and then work on option papers that go to council to make a decision on whether council are equipped to undertake self-funding for insurance purposes and what exactly that would entail. So it's quite a complex project. So capturing it in the op plan would just be the status report on how the report is progressing, whereas to have more meeting and manage outside the 16 plan, but in quite detail with all of council.
I think through the chair, the reason it's there is because insurance affordability has been a very important matter for the, particularly the Emerald community that's been subject to flooding. Brad, can you be quiet, please, because that's coming through the live streaming.
My apologies.
Right. The reason it's there is because we had to look at some other options, and there is a need for that work to continue. I know that through the flood mitigation project liaison officer who reports to Gerard, there's a body of work being undertaken with the Insurance Council of Australia looking at this matter in detail, and it logically flows that there should be some work done on investigating the pros and cons of self-insurance. And you're right, it will result in a report back to council. That's what it's about. It's a direction from council to the administration to look into this matter because of the importance of floodability, flood insurance affordability. And then if council have all the objective details about schemes that could be operating in other areas in Australia, it's in a position to make an informed decision on whether or not to take it to the next step. And that next step may be liaising with the community as to whether or not they wish to take it forward. So the reality is it's all things flood mitigation are important to continue on with. If that was captured in another line item in the existing plan, then you could take it out, but if it's not, I'd suggest as Councillor Hayes has suggested, and through the chair, that we leave it in or put it in 16, 17.
Just a query, have we got it in the right general manager? I'm suggesting it probably could go under Jason rather than, yes, it is flooding, but it's more the financial side that we're looking at. So.
Well, I think at this stage, through the chair, all things flood mitigation have been resident under Gerard. That said, you know, we're taking a team-based approach to a lot of our challenges, and it does involve working with other departments and managers as necessary, and that could be a classic example where input from the GM corporate services is relevant.
So do we want to actually name that position through the chair? Do we want to name the position coordinating it through the flood mitigation? Coordinator?
We can do that, and that provides a more contemporary update.
Well, then that's a reportable person.
That would, that said, Councillor Hayes, and through the chair, all the responsible persons within this operational plan and the 16-17 version are executive leadership team members. Contributions made by a variety of coordinators, supervisors and managers into that ultimate reporting responsibility. It certainly would leave the responsible department and business unit as GM Infrastructure and Utilities, but in the note somewhere there could be a reference that this is a body of work being investigated in progress by flood mitigation liaison officer, Ms. Dana Guzman. Just do it manually.
You want to You want a break?
I think it would be a good idea.
Everyone want a break?
Chair, we'll just add it as, a line item 4.4.4 in 1670, just as a quick reference, if someone wants to scribble it down.
4.4.
Yeah, we want to talk about that.
So are we still live streaming and
Yeah.
we're adjourning now, Mr. Chair?
Adjourn the meeting for, morning tea.
10:43.